Variable pricing is dangerous. One of the more consistent aspects of video games throughout the past 20 years was that there was a set standard price that games would cost. On occasion, a game might release at a little bit of a lower cost, and that's usually because the devs are trying to take a gamble on people buying it at the lower price point. And even more rarely, if a company was completely confident in its sales ability, it might charge just a slight bit more. And I think that was mostly only the case for PC games, though I could be wrong. With the model that's existed for the past 20 years, it's been pretty easy for people to know exactly what is going to cost them in order to play video games. For example, during the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, I knew that if I was going to buy a new game, it was going to set me back $60. I didn't have to anxiously anticipate what the price of a new video game was going to be. Rather, I could just be excited for that new game. The problem with variable pricing is that it opens up a can of worms, and it could very likely lead to video games being a luxury for the middle or upper middle class for the first time since the 90s, where it used to price people out from the lower income families. Now obviously, video games will naturally go up in price. During the PlayStation 2 era, I remember they were $50, PS3 and PS4 they jumped up to $60, and now more recently it's gone up to $70. And of course, Nintendo wants to release Mario Kart for $80. There is a typical argument going around that, of course, video games are going to go up in price. Games shouldn't cost the same amount as they did in the 90s. Inflation means games are actually cheaper today than they were back 20 years ago. But there are two things to remember. First of all, the companies are a lot more profitable now, even at the lower price points. They made as much money as they did because the games cost less. And the entire industry has grown at a staggering rate that they did not need to up the prices on anything without making a killing. And this is of course completely ignoring the fact that even with the increase in prices, it's not like this money is going to be set back to the employees or the developers. Much like with every other price increase around the world, it's going to the pockets of the people at the top. There is really no way to sugarcoat it. Prices are going up for no reason other than greed. It's not because the companies need more dollars, it's because they want more dollars. And of course they do. They're corporations. That's what they do. Stop defending them. But that's not really the entire focus of today's discussion. Because the prices are seemingly not just going to jump up to $70, or even $80. Instead, Doug Bowser, working at the most innovative company in the world, leading by example as they have always done, and jumping into a new console generation with a genius new idea, shared with us the big innovation of this generation. And it's not the ability to slide your Joy-Con sideways across the desk. No, it's the variable pricing of video games. For those that are unaware, variable pricing comes in a few different forms, and it has a few different names that all basically mean the same thing. Dynamic pricing, surge pricing, demand pricing, time-based pricing, variable pricing. They're different ways to basically state that prices will adapt with the market value. But like I said, it's a very slippery slope, and one that could quite frankly be unpredictable, and you may end up finding yourself in a position where you bought yourself a console and all of a sudden you can't afford the games. Or even if you can afford them, you might just find them at a price point that's no longer worth it. The first worry comes in the form of pricing what they think they're able to get away with based on what everybody else is doing. Mario Kart World is the guinea pig. They put that out for $80 so they can collect statistics. They want to see how well would this do in comparison to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now the numbers will be a little bit fudged because it'll be bundled with the console digitally, so a lot of people might go for that one altogether. But if they figure out that people are willing to pay $80 for the physical version, that could be dangerous. Because now Nintendo, or any other company in the industry, will see how well Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is doing and release their game for $80. Their logic will be that, well, if Mario Kart World is worth $80, my game has X, Y, and Z, so clearly it's also worth $80. And if that game also sells well enough, more and more games will be releasing at that $80 price point. You'll get the occasional one that'll charge $60 or $50 for a game that would have been $30 or $40 last generation, but for the most part, all of the big names are going to be releasing them at $80 because they saw that Mario Kart was able to get away with it. And of course, since these are the most popular games, they are going to get away with it, very likely. And with the big guns getting away with it, the mid-tier folks are going to think to themselves that, last generation, I had the same priced game as these guys. How come they're able to go up in price and I'm not? So they're also gonna jump to it. And they very well might succeed at selling it there because many of the consumers will just accept that that is the new norm. So now what ends up happening is that the new norm is $80, the budget games are at $60, and the indie games that used to be $10 are at like $30. But the problem is, we didn't just increase the price $10. That's what happens with Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. When that one came out, it set a standard that new AAA titles would be worth $70. The same way in the previous few generations, they jumped up to $60. The issue is, in a variable market, there's no cap. Because on the next cycle of games, Nintendo's going to think to themselves, well, hang on a second, Mario Kart World was worth $10 more than every other game, but now it's the same price. Now that I'm releasing Super Smash Bros., I think $90 would be a fair price because let's be real, everybody loves Smash Bros. Everybody's gonna buy it. It's only another extra $10. They'll get away with it. So now you have all of these people that maybe didn't even buy a Switch 2 yet, looking towards Smash Bros. And figuring, you know what, it's the only game that I want to buy on the Nintendo Switch, I might as well grab it. It's a one-time payment, who cares? If they're lucky, there might even be a digital bundle like there was with Mario Kart. And since Smash Bros. Will obviously sell, the whole cycle is going to start once again. Because companies are going to try to get away with whatever they think they can get away with. And oftentimes there are calculations made where if you were to lose a certain percentage of your player base, there's a sweet spot somewhere where it could still be worth your while. The other thing is, because these high-end AAA gotta have them games are priced so high, people will now look at games like Donkey Kong Bonanza and see a AAA IP being sold at $70, which is less than what Nintendo could have gotten away with, and that'll make them feel like Nintendo's doing them a favor, leading to more sales and more loyalty to reward scummy business practices. Now, the primary issue with variable pricing is that it's demand-based. It's not based off of what the game costs to make, it's based off of how much people want the game. I brought up the example in a previous video of Breath of the Wild versus Link's Awakening. Both of these games launched and retailed at the same price. Link's Awakening was clearly a much cheaper game to make, and it cost the same amount, which means they made a lot more money on it. When pricing is based off of demand, they won't lower it. Especially if the consumer is purchasing it, and the consumers are always going to buy. That's just a reality when it comes to Nintendo. A lot of times they hit that nostalgia bone just right and somebody wants to buy a game that they played 30 years ago that was just remade. So now if Nintendo was to remake Oracle of Seasons, for example, it's not like they're going to think to themselves, oh, you know what, I charged them more for this open world Mario adventure, so I can probably charge them a little bit less here because this game cost me less to make. Instead, at best, they're going to charge that $70 price tag. But more likely, they're going to be like, what, this game sold 10 million copies last time around? Psh, yeah, go ahead, charge $80. They're definitely going to buy it. Variable pricing is a one-way street. The only way the price goes down is if the demand goes down, and Nintendo has shown us that even if there's no demand, they will not drop the prices on their first-party games. And obviously I'm exaggerating, I'm aware that they cut it off for 10 to 15 to 20% sometimes if you're lucky after like 5 years, but for the most part they don't drop the prices the same way the competition does. And even when they do drop the prices, it's usually only during sales windows. So variable pricing basically means they're going to keep charging what they can charge as long as they can get away with it. And based off of the modern day gaming community, that number could go up really fast. But it's actually even scarier than that. As we established, variable prices are based off demand. They're based off the market. They're based off of surges. They're based off of purchases. Market value, if you will. Mario Kart World could very likely be worth $80 in 2025, but who's to say by the end of 2026, maybe even 2027, it's not worth $90? Think about it. If the game is selling well and they know people are going to buy the game regardless, why wouldn't they up the price? People are clearly okay with paying that original number. Let's see if we can push that upper limit a little bit more. They might find a creative way to package it. An update or a DLC that was already planned down the line might be now included with the game, similar to an upgrade pack, and then they don't even gotta say they're selling it for $90. They can just be like, well yeah, the base game was $80, but with the included golden tiles on every one of your vehicles, now it's worth $90. But they won't let you buy it without those golden tires. It's a package now. And they'll test the waters. If it sells, like I said, it just keeps going up from there. More companies get involved, more companies try the same thing. Games that were worth $80 one year are suddenly worth more the next year. You might laugh at what I'm saying, you might even think I'm crazy, but have you ever tried to pay for anything that's price was determined by the market value? No? So you've never booked an airline ticket? You've never had to book a hotel? You've never wondered why the rates in your electricity bill are higher in some months versus other months? This is what variable pricing is. On a whim, based off of how many people are buying, they can change the prices. They'll throw out a game for $80 or $90, and the problem is the only way they're going to bring that number down is if nobody buys it. But the problem is many consumers will just take the L and go for it anyway. They'll think to themselves, I've spent $10 on worse stuff just this week. And even if they choose to not buy it, it's too unpredictable. I don't know that if I don't buy this game now, they'll actually put the price down, so why am I wasting my time? And potentially could get even worse. I don't know that if I don't buy this right now, they're not going to raise the price later. So I might as well jump in now before it's $100 next year. This adds a whole new, quite frankly, stressful aspect to purchasing games. It's no longer about whether or not I want to buy the game, it's also whether or not I want to buy the game and when should I buy it. And the problem is, Nintendo is very good about being stingy with this stuff. and they are the only company that's quite frankly able to get away with it initially. If you don't believe me, the Switch is the only console in my lifetime that never had a price drop. The only console in my lifetime that's games have never gone down in price. Every other previous Nintendo console eventually had sales, but the Switch never did. And that might be because of how consistently successful it was. Or it just might be, as more and more people grabbed a Switch, eventually they were like, yeah, I'll buy one too. Now obviously, that's also because it's an affordable console. Nintendo can't succeed based off of hardcore Nintendo fans. In many ways, it also relies on families and to an extent, casual gamers to dip in. This is why I thought, and I still think, that the $450 price tag is going to set people off from purchasing the Switch 2. Contrary to what many of the comments said, I can afford a $450 console. That was never the issue. And honestly, that was hardly even the point of my rant in the first place. That video was more about the fear that I have that Nintendo will not be as successful as it was in previous generations. And for obvious reasons, because I am a Nintendo fanboy, I prefer when they're successful. The games are more fun, and the general atmosphere and environment is more fun. Now, obviously, as the week went on and I learned more and more about what they were doing with the Switch 2 and what they thought they can get away with, I was getting more and more turned away. So now I've changed where my perspective is actually that I don't want them to do well at the start, because I think they need to have their backs against the wall to realize that they are supposed to earn our sales. They can't expect it. But again, initially, the reason I was so saddened by the $450 price tag is because while I do know that many people will buy it, especially the hardcore gamer crowd, I think there's a large portion of the populace that's very unaware of all of these discussions. I'm talking people that don't watch this video, people that didn't watch the direct, people that bought 2 or 3 Switches for their households, and they bought them for each of their kids because it was the affordable option. Those ones could easily make the difference between whether or not Nintendo is successful during this console generation. And what Nintendo is doing with the console is the same thing they're doing with the video games, is the same thing they're doing with the services they're providing, and it's the same thing they're doing with the upgrade packs. They're testing the waters. They want to see who's going to bite. Are they going to have record-breaking numbers like they had before? Probably. Scalpers are going to sell them out anyway. With all of these prices, it's all the same idea. How much could I get away with? And it's a very slippery slope, because now it means the video games that are usually pretty stagnant throughout a console generation can be just as unpredictable as the rest of the economy. In 2022, they tested this with the PS5, when it was increased in various regions around the world, and it was accepted and normalized. So what's going to stop Nintendo this time around? I mean, sure, with the Switch 1, they decided to keep the price the same, but they also wittingly convinced everybody that keeping that same price was the price cut, and the consumers ate it right up. Partially because some of them just don't really care that much, but also because the Switch has just been consistently selling well since it launched. I don't think Nintendo ever had any intention of dropping the price, but they found a way to capitalize on Sony so they can earn praise for not raising their own price. But even if I'm actually just being a little bit too harsh and Nintendo was being nice, last generation they didn't explicitly mention variable prices. This time we know it's on their mind, we know it's on their radar, we know they're going to experiment with it. Much like everything Nintendo's done for the past generation that I've spent the past week complaining about, I think this whole discussion, unfortunately, is an inevitability. Nintendo held off for a long time on many practices that are commonplace in today's market, and the more they've gotten involved in it, the more money they've made, the more greedy they've become. They are no longer the company you grew up with. And I can say that about Nintendo specifically because the change only really started 11 or 12 years ago, maybe even as recent as 7 or 8 years ago. Whereas Sony and Microsoft were ahead of the game, they got into it earlier. Their fans are conditioned. Many of them have actually grown up with this Sony. I would say prior to 2019-ish, when my Sony friends would laugh at me for still being a Nintendo fanboy and spending so much money for a children's game, or something that's not knock your socks off AAA amazing, at least in their minds anyway, I'd be pretty confident in my opinion of why it's worth supporting Nintendo, because in many ways they kept their practices traditional. The games they had and sold operated in a very similar fashion to what we haven't seen probably since the Xbox 360 and PS3 era with the competition. But now the Switch, and the Switch 2 especially, is going to operate in the same fashion that the competition operates. But they want to keep the same perks as before. But if you're going to behave like the big boys, you need to drop those prices. God of War 2018 on the PlayStation Store is worth $20. Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo eShop is worth $60. And that's not even considering the fact that one-and-done gamers could easily pay for 1 month of PlayStation Plus and play whatever first-party title they can within those 30 days, and then easily cancel. So yeah, if you're not going to be the budget console, maybe you should act like it. But only time will tell. I'm personally terrified of the outlook of how the gaming industry is going to explode over the next decade. Let's hope that by the end of it, games are still affordable. Thanks again for listening to my rant. Tomorrow, I start my Super Mario Galaxy 2 retrospective, so I hope you'll be back for that.